Hello and welcome back to another Python 3 recipe. And in today's video, our problem statement is how do we inspect the parameters and return types of a function before actually making the call. So how can we, before actually making the call to this function or this one, to know if the parameters that we are about to feed to that function are acceptable from the function point of view? How do we accomplish that? Well, the answer is we can do that using the inspect module. But before, let's see something cool. Remember in the previous video we discussed parameters annotations, and we saw that we can get the annotations given to the parameters of a function using the annotations underscore method. But it's not just that. You also have defaults. You have a lot of cool things here. You have defaults, you have code. So I highly encourage you to have a look and play with all these. You will discover a lot of cool things. But here when you do defaults, you get the default values associated to like the list or tuple here, to be precise, the tuples of default parameters associated to the function. So here we see for the calculator and the calculator annotate, they have each operator as the with a default value, the plus string. So that's what you see here. When you call code D, you see code itself is an object, and when you D on that object, this is everything. So from Python you can get the code of the actual function. You can see here all the attributes related to the function code, out of which the code, the argument count. So when you see here, each of these functions take 3 arguments. They have none of, like the calculator function, when you get the code, and then from the code you get the parameters that are keywords only arguments, and then you take the count, you see that it's 0. We have no argument that is meant to be a keyword only arguments, and we are gonna see in a subsequent recipe what a keyword only argument is. Likewise, you can get all the variables related to that function, be it input parameters, output parameters, and all the functions created with all the parameters, the variables created within the function itself. So that's what you see here. So A and B are operators, and operator are input parameters to the function. Result is the output, and these are 2 variables that are created within the function for the flow of the function, like you see here. So play with this. It's very powerful. You learn a lot of things just playing with this and seeing what each of these mean. So okay, coming back to parameters introspections, our problem statement is we want to know, before actually making a call to a function, if the parameters that we are about to send to that function are valid or not. Well, in order to accomplish that, you can import the signature function from the inspect module, which is a very powerful module in Python, very useful for debugging and other kind of things. So you get from the function, by calling the signature method, the signature of the function that you're willing to inspect. Same thing, you do the same for the annotated version of the calculator. And when you loop on the parameters of the signature, so the input parameters items, you can see like every parameter here has a kind, and that kind for all the parameters in our calculator function are positional or keyword, meaning that the parameter A can be called either as a positional or a keyword argument. What about the default value? Well, default value is empty. So inspect module, the signature function from the inspect module, says that no default value has been provided for the A attribute. Likewise for the B attribute. In the case of the operator attribute, input parameter, it's also it can also be called as a positional or a keyword argument, but in this case you have a default value. So that's it. And what about the return annotation? We have no annotation for the return value, so that's why when you do signature.return annotation, you get an empty class inspect empty. The story is a bit different when we do it on the annotated version of our calculator. So here, remember, we created sign annote from the calculator annote, which is this one having the annotation to it. Now when we do it here, again, all of the parameters are positional or keyword, but now we have informations about the annotation. Here you can see the annotation from the inspect module, you can return them, and you also have the default value here is empty, and for operator is plus. What about the return? Alright, so here the return annotation was added, is a float. So that's what you see here. This arrow and then float is the annotation of the returned value. So how do we know if a function call is possible? Well, we bind the arguments that we are about to send to the signature, and then we see if it works. So then we have the bound variable here. We can now iterate and see what happens. So we have the args calls. So this is the arguments in positional, like we want to make the call with positional arguments, and we bind those arguments to the signature, and we loop, and we see that A, if we do the call to the function with these arguments in this order, A will get the value 1, B will get the value 2, operator will get the value plus. We can do the same with keyword arguments. So we bind the parameters to the keywords arguments like this, and if you loop on this, you will see that A will be called with 1 as parameter, B with 2, and operator with 2. What about now doing a function call that is not possible? Because let's say we delete operator, this is still a possible function call, because operator, remember, has a default value. So we can still make a call even if the operator is not provided, and that's what this other loop here is saying. So when we do the binding again, after the operator has been deleted, we can still make the call, but this time the inspect module tells us that the binding that we are making is A with 1, B with 2, and it's still perfectly fine. What about making a call with just B and operator? Remember, A is a positional or keyword argument and does not have any default value attached to it. So normally this call should not be possible, and that's what the signature is telling you. You cannot even bind this argument, this set of arguments, to the function, to the signature of the function. And you see here it's telling you missing a required argument. Remember, we haven't yet called the function. We have just inspected if this set of parameters is possible. So you can even test before actually making the function call if the call will be possible. And you see, when we make the actual call, we get pretty much the same exception message, required positional argument A. So you can test much more efficiently if the function call was possible. Not necessarily more efficiently, but using the inspect module, you can test before making the actual call if the call is possible. So that's it for this recipe. Hopefully you learned something new. If the case, please give it a thumbs up, and feel free to ask any question in the comment section down below. I will do my best to answer those. As always, you can find a link to the notebook for this recipe in the description. Be sure to subscribe for future videos, and thanks for watching.